You're tuned into RX Radio. Movement prescribed. Brought to you by Prescript.com. A personalized approach to keeping you healthy and making your best even better. Your hosts, Dr. Jordan Shallow and Dr. Jordan Ginta.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of RX Radio. This is a really special episode. Sat down with a good friend of mine, Kyle Traynor, owner of Elite Vitality. It's a turnkey business solution education platform for business owners in the fitness industry primarily. Kyle's mission, he just does good and does well, as does his coaches. He allows coaches to be able to operate and help more people. The meta impact this dude has is off the charts. You talk to anyone that's worked with Kyle and the family he has of trainers and coaches and clinicians worldwide. It is really second to none. Kyle goes over his Steel in the Walls program, which is an introductory, intensive, I don't want to say crash course, but it can be to those who are uninitiated or uninitiated to real business operations. Goes over branding, goes over cash flow, goes over intelligence. 3-week long course, 2 modules a week, taught live by the man himself. I've been the benefactor of Kyle's sort of guidance over the last couple of years since we met, and it's been invaluable. Me and Kyle are on the phone together once, twice a week minimum, and have been since we met. Incredibly insightful and compassionate dude. Guys, I can't recommend this enough. Prescript coaches, you guys get this for free. So if you're listening and you've been in the Prescript Level 1 program, we are going to put this up in the Facebook group and through email. So do check your email inbox for this. A great conversation. And if you haven't, do check out Kyle's podcast as well. We'll put all the links in the show notes. While you're at it, guys, a lot of you are aware of the explosion that happened in Lebanon on August 4th. Some close friends of mine have a gym that luckily is still standing, but has undergone extensive damage, immeasurable loss. Everyone is safe. So Nicholas, Shiva, Nick, Tofik, Tarek, Mo, all the guys out at Barbell House in Lebanon. We've started Lifters for Lebanon, which is a charity. If you go to the show notes and you have some change to spare, would be great to see some donations headed that way. We started this. We're at about $5,000 already. The gym was within a kilometer of the blast, which I'm sure you guys have seen by now. It was quite extensive. It's being called the 3rd largest explosion in history. So needless to say, there's a lot of cleaning up to do. They're already back in the gym training amidst broken glass and shattered windows and things just completely decimated. So there's something to be said about that level of passion and character. So guys, help out kind of the family over there in Lebanon. They've been very good to me over the years. They were the beginning of sort of me traveling around the world. So forever in debt to Nick and the family at Barbell House. So it would mean a lot to me if you guys could head over there and whatever you have kicking around, maybe you don't get the tub of protein this month and you kick some over to the boys over there in Lebanon. I know it would be greatly appreciated, and it would be greatly appreciated on my end as well. So without any further ado, guys, we're going to let Kyle do his thing, talking about Steel in the Walls. Do go to elitevitality.net and register. Level 1 coaches, keep an eye out. It's going to be in the Facebook group. You get this for free. 3 weeks, 2 lectures a week, intensive on cash flow, branding, and intelligence, the pillars of real business, not Facebook ads, not any of this nonsense, stuff that actually works and again allows you to do good and do well. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Again, we're looking Lifters for Lebanon. The GoFundMe page is going to be linked in the bio. And then, of course, Elite Vitality.net, and we can register for Steel in the Walls there. Well worth the money, guys. I do hope you enjoy the episode, and we'll see you guys next week. One of the things that I've learned on the business end so much from you, and we talk almost on a weekly basis and have for almost since the day we met, but the one thing that I think the highlight of this will be, because you're no stranger to this podcast, you're almost a co-host at this point with the number of times you've been on or I've been on yours, is the applied principles, right? Like, because it's a hard space, especially in the fitness world, but you in the business world as well. Like, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. It's quickly becoming one of my favorite quotes. And just listening to a little bit of preamble and banter and chatting with you before,
understanding like, you know, how even just the steel in the walls course itself is an iterative process that is something that's constantly being refined. And then, you know, we'll talk a little bit about the concepts that that course sort of highlights, and why it's sort of a missing link, especially in the fitness business sort of world. But like that, all that stuff is well and good. But I think the biggest takeaway from learning from you from a business perspective is just watching you grow your own business and being like, oh, okay, like the iterative process is something that, you know, a lot of people will refer this to like the Bruce Lee principle, right? Fear not the man who knows 10,000 kicks, right? Fear the man who's done one kick 10,000 times, right? And it's like, here we have, you know, you develop the steel in the wall course, and now every time you do it, it's an iteration. It's the same kick, right? It's the same kick, but you're practicing it, refining it. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. And I'm starting to see that now, and steering myself away from that is just the idea of iteration and practice. So like, what was like, you don't get an intro, by the way. Hi, Kyle. Everyone knows who you are. Like, what was the inception? What was the catalyst? Like, where did you see like product market fit for bringing something like this steel in the walls course to an industry like the fitness industry?
Yeah, so it's honestly COVID, man. Like, COVID's been an accelerant, right? And my opinion is that COVID has just brought forward anything that was going to happen in the next 5 years for everybody, for every industry. Everything that was going to happen is just happening now instead of 5 years later. So, you know, and what I mean by this is, and honestly, like, you can look at the stats now. Me and you've been talking a little bit about this, but you can kind of look at the stats here and go, you know, Fitness Australia last week put out a post which was, you know, 70% of business owners wouldn't make it past 1 month without stimulus, so without, you know, money from the government, which means that, you know, 70% of our industry would close down. If stimulus stopped today, they would close down in a month, which, like, that's alarming in itself. But, you know, I preempted this, and I don't say that to be cocky. It's like, you know, when we when we entered COVID, I had a decision to make, and everybody had a decision to make. But my decision was, okay, you know, from where we're positioned as a company in the industry, what do we do? Like, what's our next move, right? And I honestly remember this. Basically, 2 weeks before we went into lockdown, I sat there and had this conversation with myself in my backyard, and I was sitting there, and I was laying on the grass with a pen and paper and in the sun, and I was like, okay, so, like, what's our next move? And I started to see marketers and kind of, you know, what, you know, 90% of the industry who call themselves, you know, business coaches, really they're just marketers, right? Like, that's the fucking problem we have. That's one of the problems. But I looked at them and I go, okay. And I've seen a lot of these like care packages and like fucking just like things going out. And I'm like, this is not the problem right now. Like, this is not the issue. The issue is that nobody knows how to keep money. Nobody knows how to play defense in their business. Like, you know, I often think that a lot of people say they want a successful business, but really what they chase is financial stability. Right. And that's the initial. That's like, you know, there are people that once they get to a certain stage, they want business growth. But really what most people want when they come to me is some type of financial stability. Like, you know, that's honestly, most business owners in our industry just want to be able to do what they love for a very long time. Right. And that's at the core of what they want to do. Like, I often ask that question. You know, who here, and in the course, right, I go, who here wants to sell their business in the next 5 years? Crickets. Nobody has plans of selling their business. Why? Because again, they're not looking to just make a quazillion dollars, right? Like, people actually love what they do in our industry, and they want to be able to sustain that and do it with freedom and flexibility, and that allows them to reach their potential as a coach. So it's, okay, I'm sitting there and I go, what does our industry actually need? What's the thing that isn't sexy that's actually going to deliver and start to raise the standard of business owner in our industry? Because that's what it's about, right? Like, deep down, for a very long time, I've known that the standard of business owner in our industry is just poor, right? And it's because there's a lack of education on business out there. Everybody wants to teach you how to make money, but nobody wants to teach you how to keep it, right? And that's the problem that we see, is that, we've got, most people try to fix financial problems with marketing or growth, and it just doesn't work that way. So I sat there, and then a conversation that me and you had, I think on a podcast that we did it was one of our first ones. You said the term to me, steel on the walls. And I was like, for some reason, I absolutely fell in love with it. And I just anyway, I was like, well, there's something, I don't even know why, but it's like, okay, this is in my head. This is the first thing that comes to mind. It's like, there's no steel on the walls from a business perspective. So then I actually researched it, right? And it come up, and it's actually started talking about how houses are built. And the thing that actually, the core definition, or the core kind of goal of using steel in the walls when building a house, is earthquake resistant and flexibility of a design, right? So then I was like, in my head, I'm like, ding, 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 ding. We're about to go through a fucking earthquake, right? And the one thing that most people struggle with is they actually don't have the freedom to reach their potential as a coach or a business owner. Their decisions are always compromised. So then in my head, I'm like, okay, steel on the walls, steel on the walls. And then I started to just map this out, and I go, look, like, what are the things that that skew our judgment the most? What are the things that have the biggest impairment on our judgment? And the first one was cash flow. It's like, that's an easy one, like capital allocation. And then the fact that, most people are compromised financially. They're not working because they can, they're working because they have to. If something happened to them tomorrow and they had to take a week off, they wouldn't be able to do it. So then therefore they're compromised. And that means, we can actually start to look at the second and third order consequences of these things and go, okay, well, if my decision's compromised, when Susan comes in and Susan's not my ideal client, or she's not the client that I want to deal with in my company, there's probably someone better suited, and am I actually going to get her the best possible result, which is a direct reflection on my company, or am I just taking her on because she's $70 a week into the bank account? And there's something to be said about that. Like, I think that's a mistake most people make. Like, it's like revenue is always the target, and it's like, yeah, that's not the measuring stick for success. Like, that's the short-term play. It's like, if you're always just topping up your revenue, then and you're not churning out like world-class results, then you're never really progressing. So there's it is compromised decisions. And then, what I really come down to, what I really kind of found when I actually start to build these concepts out, is that judgment is if we're playing if we're playing defense, right, and we're looking at steel on the walls as your defense in business, we need, there's the quote, the best offense is a great defense, right? Like, that's the quote that, championship teams are built on defense. That's hands down. Any championship team built on defense. And then I started to look at, okay, how does our offense actually get better from our defense? Like, how does that actually, what's the dynamic there? And it's because judgment, right? It's my judgment as a business owner is like my precursor to offense. If I don't have great judgment, then my offense is always, running in the wrong direction really, really quickly. Or I just make, bad decisions cost me time and money, good ones make me time and money. So it's like, that's what we're looking at there. That's why judgment is that core piece. So the inception of it was going, okay, like, I'm not just going to fall into the trap of selling what's sexy. What's a true representation of my brand and what we want to do in this industry and the legacy we want to leave? And then what are people actually missing right now? Like, why are people, I started to see people suffering, and that's the truth. And that's the saddest thing about this, is that I really started to see people suffer when, they started to see the bad news coming through from, within the pandemic, that, it's kind of going bananas right now, right? But this was right at the start, and I said, what is the problem? Like, is the problem actually that, is COVID actually doing this to people, or is it just accelerated the problems that people would have faced in 5 years? And our industry is, and we can see that now. Back then, I didn't know this. Back then, we didn't have the Fitness Australia stat. But, I can go back now and say, this is definitely a problem, right? And it's a systematic problem. Yeah, like our goal as a company is to create better business owners across the board. Because why? Because that means a better industry. That means that our industry as a whole raises the standard. We start to change the industry for people that come after us. And if we're not doing that, then why are we doing what we're doing? If we're not trying to make this a better industry for people that come, after us in 20 to 30 years time, and we're not pushing the needle forward for everyone as an industry, then I shouldn't be in business.
Yeah, and I think adopting that legacy mentality is something that it's looking forward to look back, right? Like looking ahead to see how you'll be kind of remembered. And I think a lot of people can exploit. I think it's a low hanging fruit when it comes to like exploiting an industry that doesn't have like a solid foundation in business principles, because you can extort the fitness industry for exorbitant amount of money without a whole lot of actual like skill in the field, which is a crazy thing to me. Like you can't become a real estate developer unless you know what the fuck you're doing, right? Like you can't make money in like flipping houses or any sort of development or anything like that if you don't know a thing or two about real estate development. You can get very far just knowing like basic sort of, not even basic fitness principles or business principles. You can get by with this like a rig that sort of looks good, an Instagram account and a PayPal button, and like you can make like an honest living. So it's so concentrated, or so rather it's so saturated with people who really aren't here for the legacy play. But if you start to look at some of the giants, and I think this is always an indicator to me of how invested someone is into anything they do, is do they know the history behind it? Like if you know the history behind something, it's shown that you have a respect for your field. Like you have a respect enough for those who've come before you, and then you look to leave a legacy in the same way where people are going to pay homage to you in your field. Like I always do this with strength coaches. I start listing off strength coaches that I think are some of the pioneers in the industry, like Andre Benoit or Charles Poliquin or Buddy Morris or whatever. And if I see fucking eyes glass over, I was like, you're not going to be here in 20 years because you didn't know who was here 20 years ago, right? And it's the same thing with like in the business space. It's like if you don't know some of these principles that are like classically proven, it's like you don't really know business. Like you said, like you just know marketing. Like the word cash flow. When you said the word cash flow to me one time, like the thought in my head was like someone at a strip club just like making it rain. I was like, I don't think he's talking about that. I was like, I probably don't know anything about business. Like it's just sort of marketing. What do you think is the biggest, or has been historically, when you go through and like you can kind of assess now, we've done steel in the walls in a couple of iterations. What has been the number one takeaway or topic or pain point that when you get to it, this is what grips the most people? Like, what is the biggest blind spot in our industry from a business perspective?
It's hard because I think those three core pillars are like that's what I think they are. Like I think and what I mean by that is branding, intelligence, and cash flow. Like these are the things that everybody skips, right? It's like because we're not like the problem with Instagram, right? Is that and this is honestly like our business grows on word of mouth. We don't, very rarely do you see us putting up saying, we've made this person $1 million and like come join our program. It's just not how we roll. Like, ours is going to be this illustrious club that is like nobody knows about. Why? Because it's like that's the problem, right? That's the actual biggest problem in the industry. Everybody wants to teach you how to make money. Everybody wants you to fall for the trap and I'm going to make you $1 million in like 3 hours or like whatever that is. And again, that's like everybody wants to play offense before they've played defense. It's like, again, as a kid, right, you get taught how to throw the winning touchdown. Like, that's what you do as a kid. You kick the winning goal. Like you do all these things. And that's like, that's you as an infant. But, once you get to like some high level of sport or like even just like as an adult, you understand that like if you don't have a strong defense, you're not winning the championship. It's like if you don't have strong culture, you're not winning the championship. If you and all these other factors start to play into it. And then I actually train like I think that's our biggest problem is like you've got people who are in their infancy in business who are just trying to go straight to offense. It's like, and offense is marketing, offense is growth, right? And it's, the problem is, if you play offense without a stable defense, you just become tired, frustrated, and busy, you know, like, and that's the biggest problem is, like, most people they get busy. They get really busy. And even that's them, you know, having some success. And then, like, you know, most trainers will tell you that they don't think they can sustain this for the rest of their life. And it's like, why? And again, it's because they're playing offense without defense. So I think the biggest problem and the biggest blind spot are these three pillars. It's like, most people want to go to marketing without a brand. It's like, they don't know the story of their business. They don't know the philosophical meaning behind their business. They don't know the philosophical meaning about their own life. Like, you know, this is the thing. It's like, you know, you want to have a brand, you got to put in the work on yourself over and over and over again. Cashflow, you know, like, most people, again, are trying to fix their financial problems with marketing. It's like, again, because it's much easier for me to go, yep, it's marketing. Leads is my biggest problem. You know, that's the reason my business isn't growing. And it's like, yeah, look, I disagree. It's like, I know plenty of people who make, you know, this is all relative, right? But it's like, that don't make a heap of money, that are still very financially stable and actually, you know, wealthy, right? It's like their wage doesn't determine their wealth ever, right? And it's like, there's something to be said about that. And I think Cashflow is definitely like the one that everybody struggles with, because it's both psychological and analytical. Like, it's such a dynamic beast. You know, that I think like, branding is something that not enough people spend enough time on. But I think Cashflow is the one that people struggle with the most, because this is something that's handed down to us. You know, this is like culture. This is family. This is ancestry. You know, this is our ancestors passing this down to us. So to break that and to actually change that, you know, like, I often say with myself, you know, I really struggled with money for so long, especially in the first 3 years of my business. And it was purely because I never had any guidance in that area. And I got handed down this relationship with money, which is the one I got from my mom. You know, my mom was a single mother. She did a great job raising us. Like, she's my fucking hero. But if she didn't meet my stepdad, she wouldn't have, like, you know, she was like, she was a very successful woman making a lot of money, but she never knew how to keep that money, right? So it's like, I got handed down that. So if I didn't put in the work on myself to change that and take responsibility for it and understand that that's autonomous, my relationship with money is like, it's autonomous. I don't get a say in that unless I choose to have a say in that. Right. I have to first of all admit that I'm not in the best place because I don't know something and I'm wrong. Like, the hardest thing to do in life is admit you're wrong, or you're not doing something in the right manner. But Cashflow is such a dynamic kind of beast, that because it's like, you then have to first of all get your relationship with money in the right place, and then you have to spend time on it and understand numbers. Like, most people are scared of numbers, right? Like, think about it. You can even tie this back to training. It's like, why does like 70% of people go into the gym and just fucking train without having numbers there? It's because they don't want to be held accountable. Guess what? If I fail, there's nothing there to hold me accountable. The numbers hold me accountable. And it's like, you know, if I go in there and I'm meant to hit 180 kilo squat, a PB or whatever it is, right? And I'm meant to be hitting that, and I don't hit it, I then have to go back and look at why I didn't hit that. And then guess what? Usually it's because you fucked up somewhere along the line, right? And then, you know, for me to accept that, and even going into a meet, right? For me to then look back, and if I, you know, let's say I come second, right? And I come second because I didn't hit my final squat, which is a number that, based on everything that we've been through, I should have hit. It's a preparation thing, right? And think about it. There's two types of people in this world. There's the people that go back, take a really good hard look at themselves and say, yeah, this is why it happened. And then they come back better and they make sure they've done it. And again, it's not the fact that they hit the squat that matters. It's the fact that they go back and take a good hard look at themselves. Or you got the person who fucking blames like the shoe or something, you know, like, it's like, oh yeah, it's my fucking shoe. Like, you know, and it's like, there's two types of people in this world, and it's much easier for me to put blame outside of myself and I talk about this as cash flow, it's much easier for me to neglect the numbers and never look, right? Because as long as I never look, I never really have to accept the consequences, right? And that's the biggest problem. It's like, it's much easier for people to not look and just neglect it for their whole life, because then they, guess what? As long as I don't look, I'm not responsible. As long as I don't look, I never really have to accept the consequences, right? But there's a big problem there, and I think that's one of the biggest things, right? Like cash flow is definitely the blind spot for most people, because first of all, there's a systematic problem with there's a lack of education. Now, whether that's purposeful, that's done on purpose. I don't know. I'm not going to point the finger too hard just yet, but there is a systematic problem with people not being taught these things as they enter the kind of world of business in the fitness industry. But then there's also, to have success at anything, you can't just run away from your problems. You have to accept them. And the more frequent you admit you're wrong, or you're not putting in the work, and you're not competent, right? The consequences get smaller, right? It's hormesis. Like this is the thing. It's like if we sweep the cash flow problem under the carpet, continuously, it grows into a big fucking problem, and then eventually it costs you 10 times the amount of time and money that it was going to cost you if you dealt with it in there and then, right? That's the thing. Sit down and look at your cash flow every single week, and I guarantee you don't ever have a big problem. Sweep it under the rug, and then eventually it hits you. And the other thing with sweeping it under the rug is it then becomes a subconscious burden, right? It actually starts to then it was autonomous, and then it just gets worse, right? It's like it becomes this burden and dictates your decisions without you even knowing, right? Like think about it. If I have no idea where I'm sitting from a cash flow perspective, and Susan comes in, we talked about Susan before, and Susan comes in, like, fuck, I'm selling her. I'm getting her in no matter what, because I don't know what tomorrow holds for me. I don't know what my position looks like, because I'm too scared to look, right? So then it's my cash flow and my relationship with money directly affects my coaching business, which is, a lot of people, they don't make that connection. They don't understand that business and coaching are very much integrated into this one system. It's like most people you can't, I don't give a fuck what anyone says. Like some of the best coaches, the smartest guys in the world are out there saying that the key to being successful as a personal trainer is like being a great coach. And I'm like, yeah, you can keep telling me that. You try out science, a bad relationship with money. You try out science, fucking a lack of business knowledge. You're not reaching your potential. You're not going anywhere unless you get this stuff under control.
Yeah, and I just think it's so misguided to default to hard work, which is, I think, something that a lot of people will do. Like, the reason you're not successful is you don't work hard enough, which is kind of a silly thing to think about. And I think a lot of time in the fitness industry, we try and equate output with input, which is really kind of like you said, like I know plenty of wealthy people that they don't need to keep like a very giant machine running, right? They understand these first principles. And it's funny to just, watch the iterations and the growth of like Elite Vitality over the last couple of years to see like how it always starts with personal development, and really what you're doing when we start to talk about branding and brand strategy, we start to talk about cash flow, we start to talk about judgment, intelligence, like all of these things are just vehicles to reach people and really kind of challenge them and their personal development. Like whether it's the relationship with money, which, to me is something that, like you said, is sort of autonomous, it's hardwired. Like, it's like I was the kid who would like be at soccer practice in the parking lot, and everyone else would be driving away, and I'd be standing next to my dad because our fucking car wouldn't start. And I'd just be like, well, this sucks, right? Like, oh, the old Pontiac 5000 won't start again. Like, we're going to pretend like we're going to go practice some more until all the cool kids leave in their cars that work. And it's like, I grew up with like a really weird, and people who had money, like, were not bad, but like, there was like almost a resentment around money. And that's like a really common pain point for people. So people just learn to not look. And a lot of the looking is like, yeah, you're looking at the numbers, but the numbers are a direct reflection of your behaviors, right? Which I think it always, like you said, like it always comes back to that. And then whatever vehicle it takes, like, and sometimes the vehicle is training, like actually just training in the gym. right? Like training can be a great way to kind of open that window into personal development. So that's what I like about those strategies, and like, or those 3 touch points that you cover in the course, is that each one of those, the root of each one of those is at the level of the individual. So like a lot of the practice is like, a lot of the work you have to do is really like just on yourself, and like starting with the awareness, like you said, like when people don't look at the numbers, like what is that? Well, it's a willingful blindness to their own reality when it comes to money. And it's like, well, how you do one thing is how you do everything. What else are you willfully blind of in your life, right? So it's a pretty interesting, like, and then knowing like a handful, well, fuck, more than a handful of coaches that have gone through like both mine and your programs, like, look, here's the tools of the trade from a technical perspective, but then here's the tools of the trade from a business perspective, and just seeing like the amount of personal development that comes out of like, oh fuck, like I got to look at the books, like I got to look what's coming in, what's going out. Because a lot of people, what they do, especially in the fitness industry, where things can move quickly, and I suppose that's true in any business, but people scale their lifestyle and scale their problems to the equal scale of their business. And then all of a sudden it's just like they're in the same relative position, just with like a bigger bottom line.
Yeah, and I mean, I did a podcast last night with Austin and Lukey. So there was like it was a late night one because dynamic. We actually talked about this, right? And it's like, bigger isn't always better. Like, and one of the quotes that sticks with me is, the world belongs to the fast, not the big. And for me, that just talks about your adapt to adapt is key, but your ability to adapt and again, think about it, adaptation, right? It's like, my ability to adapt is directly reflected of my judgment. If my judgment is poor, then I don't adapt. And that's the problem. Like, what happened when COVID hit? Like, think about it. If 70% of people are fucking, their business is not going to survive past 1 month, it purely means they had the inability to adapt. Why? Maybe because they didn't track their cash flow. Maybe because they had no idea where their company was positioned. Maybe, when it was time to adapt, like the big one with adaptation is intelligence. If you're tracking the metrics of your key outcomes in business, what's getting you a great return, which means it's easy to adapt. Like, you want to know what made it really easy for us to build Steel on the Walls and then offer it for free, right? And the reason we offered it for free is not because like we wanted to get as many people in as we could. It's because we believe this information is foundational and we want this to be in the hands of as many people as possible, right? Because it makes our industry better. That's why we did it. But the reason that we could do that is because we had cash in the bank. And guess what? Because we looked at our intelligence and we knew, based on the key outcomes and the key metrics we track in our business, this was the right move to make, right? And just think about it. It's like, if you have apps, it's the thing, right? And this is just a prime example. Let's say you run a podcast and you go, the podcast is what gets us the best return out of every platform in our business. When COVID hits, you double down on the podcast, right? You double down on what's getting you the best return in business. But the problem is, you can think, if you don't have a brand, then you don't know. That's your guidance tool for decision making. That's what tells you what's right or wrong from a brand, from a decision making process. So, for me to go out and then start talking about marketing and Ferraris when COVID hit, yeah, my brand says that that's not what we're fucking about. So I'm not going to do that. Intelligence then goes, okay, so what is the decision we need to make and the strategy we need to implement? And then my intelligence says, how do we actually start to export and communicate that strategy to our audience? And then that is adaptation in motion. And then cash flow is, how much capital can I allocate to that strategy, right, to get it off the ground? And what freedom do we have from capital in the bank to actually really go gung-ho at this, right? And you can see now how that system directly allows me to make a decision. And judgment is, we only know good judgment from looking backwards, right? So I can't actually, I can only say that was great judgment because I can look back and say that was a good call, right? But that doesn't help us in the moment. So what does help us in the moment is the system that is Steel, right? And again, like, I put this is like a 3 years of work that's just hit me in an epiphany on one day, right? But that is like, you can see how all of a sudden that the dynamics and the integration of all three of those allows me to make better decisions, which pay me dividends down the track.
Yeah, I think a couple of things to highlight there is when we talk about intelligence in the fitness industry, there are people who I love, and we're both kind of influenced, and me heavily, by like sort of the reading list that you drop on my desk once a week. But like I love the quote from Naval Ravikant: "You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes." Like that to me is like, there's nothing, because when we talk about metrics, we talk about statistics, we talk about, you know, garnering and harvesting this intelligence to make better judgments, right? It's the people are looking at likes, and they're looking at subscribers, and they're looking at followers. There's a guy, so I work, so I have a friend of mine, Ryan Fisher, and he's been on the podcast a few times, and he was putting me on to a guy that he was hanging around with, bigger in the fitness industry. But like I look at his following, and it's like 15,000, which, you know, if we're looking at this as like a KPI, we're not looking at our bottom line and really getting, you know, hard numbers as a marker of our intelligence, like the intelligence to allow us to make better judgments in our business. This guy with 15,000 followers does, are you ready for this? 500,000 in revenue a week. This guy's making $1 million a fortnight USD, right? So it's like, and I think people get too lost in the like in the dopamine race of the social media, and they start to conflate social capital with actual revenue, right? Mm-hmm. And that's like one of the big things. And the second thing is those three principles, like you need, once you have two, the other one kind of figures itself out, which I think is like, and most people are just running around with one. Right? Like most people are just running around with, and I think of like, I use the same comparison when I talk about like bracing in the squat, which is like kind of a weird parallel to think, but there's three components to a brace. Just like there's three components to this strategy of like, you know, you need to have your intelligence, you need to have your brand, and you need to understand your cash flow, right? Like those three things. Like just some people, when they brace for a squat, they just try and use their air and their diaphragm. It's like, that's not going to hold up. Like I always think of like a stool with three legs, right? Like what is going to, if you're going all in on one of these legs, you're going to have to take a few, you know, napkins or your wallet and jam it under. What's holding up those other two legs, right? Like, are you holding yourself up by your cash flow because you're just like, so like growth focused, right? Are you just trying to scale your business, and all your other problems that I have a branding issue. Oh, I don't have a brand strategy. Well, I have cash flow, so then I have to go into marketing and go through paid spend. Right? I have to, because I can't reach a market because I don't know what my fucking brand is, right? So here I'm taking from this leg, I'm trying to wedge underneath, right? And it's the same thing when we start to think about like intelligence, like, you know, like I have all this metrics, I have all this data, but again, if you don't have a brand and you don't have cash flow, you can't act on it, right? So each one of these, I think of that like shaky stool at the end of the bar where someone has to come in and start propping up different ends to make sure it balances out. It's like, I think you need to have at least two, and the third one will sort itself out, or at least then you can allocate your time or energy or resources to figuring out that last one. Like if you have good intelligence and you have your cash flow in order, you can then take the time and focus on the development of the brand and really understand what that is. You have enough defense, like you said, to now be able to afford to fix this last problem. But most people are coming into it with just all in on one of the, and they don't even realize it, right? Until you lay it out for them and be like, here are these pillars. When they see that, most people are standing on one leg, right? There really is this one leg of this thing that's holding up their whole business. And then when something like COVID hits and time just goes into this compressor, and like you said, just takes 5 years of what was going to happen, and frankly, gives you a gift. And goes, look, here's 5 years of consolidated problems in 4 months.
Yeah, I think as well, like one thing I will say is like, I get asked this question a lot, and it's like, okay, so how do I know that I can then start transition to offense from defense? Like, how do I, when's the right time? And it's like, I go, you're really looking at this the wrong way. Think of defense like paying rent, right? It's like, once it's done, you got to keep doing it. Like, it's not something that once it's done, you can just move forward and all of a sudden it's, you can just start the sexy stuff. It's like, no team sport plays defense, then offense. You know, they're playing them both at the same time, right? This is a dynamic game. And the only way that you can truly win is by never taking, never really leaving these things behind, right? Never stop playing defense. So it's like, you've got to have the ability to do both at the same time. And that's something that I will say is that, you can lose this at any time. Like, your brand can fall behind at any time. Your cash flow, if you don't look at it for 2 months, your judgment is impaired, right? So think about it. If judgment really is the key piece that we're trying to achieve, we're trying to improve that and move the needle forward from, integrating and kind of systematically practicing and kind of working on those 3 elements, then if I stop them at any point in time, my offense actually gets worse. Now, the reason I say defense is that can you truly become your most creative and innovative self, right? When your decisions are compromised, when you're not playing defense. Like, if you don't have good judgment and your decisions are always compromised, can you truly be your most innovative and creative self? Now, if we're actually going to say, well, what's the root of all offense? Like, how do we actually have the offense, right? Which is, growth in a sense, leverage, it's scale. Then what we actually have to start looking at is that I actually can't, if I ask you this question and say, well, what's the number one thing that's allowed you to get to where you are in business? I guarantee you, right? It's your ability to sit down and write the amount of content that you do, or not the amount, the quality, right? It's like, can you actually do that unless you have those 3 pillars looked after? Now, my argument is I don't think you can, right? I think this is the thing that holds people back the most. Is, again, they're trying to go straight to offense without having this there, and then they wonder why they're either always highly stressed, they're frustrated, they lack time, they lack creativity. Like, that's a big one. A lot of business owners feel lost, right? So they might have this wonderful strategy, right? This beautiful strategy that they think is going to change the world. And it's like the slam dunk that's either going to get them 1 million followers or $1 million. And then all of a sudden it doesn't work, and then they're lost, right? And it's like, oh, now what, right? And again, these core principles in defense that we talk about, like, they are your guiding thing, so that when this big strategy doesn't work in offense, you just, instead of having to go back to square one or you're getting lost and not knowing what to do, it's a small step to the left. Like, it's a little pivot, and then you keep going. And you said something earlier on that I think is like, it kind of reiterates that point, is that, like, it's a continuous game. It's like, you're consistently growing. When you're growing a business, you're not, like, you ask anyone who's had any form of success at all, nobody has a big break. Like, nobody, all of a sudden it just happens overnight. Like, this is just fucking day in, day out doing this shit for the love of it. Like, you often think, like, when you have these inception moments, right, where you maybe write a really cool course or something like that, and you're like, yeah, this is it, this is the one. And then all of a sudden you realize, like, yeah, I've got to keep doing this. And then, the beauty of it is that if you're truly doing something you love, and I'm lucky enough to say that I found what my love is that I love business strategy and the psychology of business strategy and the psychology of business, really. And that's why I just chase it. Like, I'll never stop doing this. I love this, but there is no such thing as an overnight success. And I know that you see the memes and all these things pop up, and, like, people, like, it's like this hard work thing, but it's not really about hard work. It's just about consistency of doing the things that you should be doing. And it's about not neglecting your problems and not running away from the things that scare you, but actually facing them and looking them square in the eye, right? Because when you look them square in the eye, right, you can actually deal with them. No longer are they a fear. They're no longer the boogeyman under the bed, right? They actually become your best friend. And I was talking to so Toby, who's the owner of Creative Cubes, we did a podcast interview. And he kind of said this thing, right? And he's like, this guy's like you got to really put yourself in this guy's shoes for a second. He has 5 locations, like, amazing buildings. You could just imagine the pressure this guy's under. And he's sitting there and he's like, when this hits, I'm just rubbing my fucking hands. He's like, I go, this is it. Like, this is, if this is the challenge, and like, this is what I'm in business for. Like, he actually said that to me. And I'm like, look, I'm sure that underneath the hood, this guy's under a fucking lot of stress. But that is really what a business owner is. Like, these are the moments you wait for in business, when you're truly in business for the love of it, for the legacy of it, right? And if you're not just trying to make a quick buck, when these times hit, it's all, again, it's the same thing. When you get to the platform, all you've got is your body of work. It doesn't matter what you're doing today. It matters what you've done over the last 6 months, right? And that's the bottom line here, is that all you've ever got is your body of work. So when you're in the moment and you maybe want to run away from that thing that scares you, or you want to sweep the Cashflow dragon under the rug, you got to ask yourself, in 6 months' time, when I reach this point of absolute black swan stress, this random event that fucking is here to absolutely test me, am I willing to look back and say that I have or have not put the body of work in, because that directly affects the decisions I make in the present moment. And those decisions are my judgment. So as a business owner, if you're not practicing these 3 core principles because they scare you, in 6 months' time, when you are faced with a challenge, that's when it really matters.
Yeah, and I think the thing that gets lost in that is the compounding effect and the positive, right? Like, and I think once you can understand it and apply it, and you can use these strategies to overcome a hurdle, and you realize at the other end of 6 months how much further along you are than you would have been if you didn't kind of face that, the dragon of, like, rather than sweeping it under the rug. Then all of a sudden I can see where someone with, like, and I've been to Cubes, like, they're incredible spaces, and I think in such high demand with, like, the current workspace, like, if we want to talk like product market fit, like, I think a business like that is so smart, right? Like, it's just, I could only imagine the stress, but to be able to sit there and lick your chops in a situation where it's like, hey, no one can go anywhere where there's a lot of people, like, oh shit, my whole business is people coming in. But, like, that just tells me, look, this guy's gone through a decade of, problem after problem after problem, and in the compounding responsibility that it takes to handle it, because 5 locations, how many people are dependent on that guy for a job, right? Like, and all of a sudden it's bigger than you, right? And that's the whole point. You should be doing it. Like, if you're doing it from a legacy perspective, it will be bigger than you, right? And when it's you have staff and you have people on contract that won't deal, like, it's like, I can go to sleep, and if I don't have enough money, I can sleep outside. I've done that before. That's fine. But I can't go to sleep knowing that I'm responsible for someone else's reason that they sleep inside. Right? That'll be what keeps me up at night. So to hear a guy with, 5 physical locations go, like, I'm excited, that tells me a decade-long story of someone who's reaped the benefits of facing down problems in the moment, because that's a big fucking problem for someone that owns 5 brick and mortar locations that, like, technically can't be open.
South Melbourne, right? Like, that opened in Feb, 2 weeks before COVID hit. That is at least like a fucking $2 million fit out, like $3 million just a fit out. That's not including rent or anything, right? Like, and that's the level of business this is, right? But it's like, that in itself is like, could you imagine that, right? You've just put your absolute all into something. And this is location number 5, right? So it's like number 4, sorry. And there's another 3 in the works. So, like, this guy is a killer. He's just like, I look up to him as a mentor and kind of have some really cool conversations with him. But man, like, this is, it's just like, I was sitting there, like, I was about to, like, I wanted to run up and, like, full chest him, like, at the end of it. Like, there was that kind of conversation, right? But it's like, man, if like, and that's the thing that when I look at it, I go, like, that's what business is about, man. Like, and this is the thing with branding, right? Like, if you actually build a brand, the brand is more than you, right? And that's the biggest mistake people make, right? If you skip the branding phase, you're completely running a business for selfish reasons, right? The legacy doesn't exist. Yeah, like, the legacy to make this industry a better place doesn't exist without a brand, right? Because the brand is never built around you, like, Elite Vitality isn't about me, Prescript isn't about you. And it's like, that's, we are a vehicle to and a mechanism to help express that brand. But, you're 100% right with what you said. It's like, And I think that's a mistake that people make. Again, it's like offense without defense. Well, it's like, okay, well, if you're not actually putting time into your brand, I can guarantee you that when the times get tough and you don't have a brand, that means that you're going to default to everything being about you, right? Like, oh, I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough this, and you fall into the victim mentality absolutely autonomically, right? Because you don't have that brand there. Like when we go into tough times, right? I can guarantee you, when I'm sitting there writing Steel on the Walls, I'm not thinking about my own backyard. I'm not thinking. Not one part of me sat there right then and said, like, there was no selfish drive there. I thought, holy shit, I've got employees that I have to look after. Holy shit, I've got 60 members sitting there that I now have to absolutely stand up for. And I have to make sure, because guess what? If I'm not standing up, they're not surviving. They're not getting through this. I'm the leader. I'm Mel Gibson at the front with my face painted, fucking charging, and they're sitting behind me, right? And if I don't stand up right now, and I don't, truly start to fucking stand up and absolutely charge, chest up, no matter what, and do the right thing, I got, nearly 70 to 80 people that absolutely perish, right? And that's what happens when you build a brand. Like and that's the thing. Like, think about it. Our greatest feelings and memories in life are when we do things for other people, right? It's when we actually, like, that warm fuzzy feeling that when you do something for someone and it actually fucking changes their life. Like, that is when we're at our best as humans. When we're at our worst is when we become the victim and we make everything about us. And the biggest thing in life that I've learned is that I am fucking a speck in the ocean, mate. Like, I am, I often think about this, and it's something that I learned through meditation and Sam Harris, but it's like, I am not the center of the universe. I see the world through that lens, though, because that's how we're built. We can only see out into the world. We can only, we think about it. If what I see is that I am the center of the universe, but someone else exists, right? And the fact that someone else exists tells me that I'm not the center of the universe. And when you realize that, that is the absolute most liberating thing in the world, because no longer do I make life about me. No longer am I consistently just thinking about, how life affects me. But I actually start to realize that, the world really doesn't, like, nature does not give a fuck about me. Nature is this beast that does what it does for the best of humanity, whether it's good or bad for you. Whether, it doesn't care about you, because guess what? It's this beast that does the best thing for the world, right? And there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. But that is when you're at your best. And that is what building a brand really is all about. It's building about something that makes and takes the industry to a better place. And it's about making people's lives better. It's about incorporating what you do into someone else's transformation, right? And we're not talking about transformation overweight to six-pack abs. We're talking about giving someone a sense of meaning in their life and then making their life, something better, and helping them achieve something greater and helping them reach their potential.
It's funny. I do this all the time. I go on Google Maps because, I'm always everywhere and nowhere, which is kind of a weird thing. I go on Google Maps and I tell people to do this. Just start scrolling out until the map stops you. And you realize that, like, you're just a tiny little red, even overstated red dot. And it's always a perspective shift for me. Like, so when I get too far into my own head, I literally go out, and I did this the other day. I literally was on my phone and we were driving up, A1 Bruce Highway up fucking northern Queensland. And I just started pinching the screen and just started scrolling out and then scrolling out. And then you can see all of Queensland. And then you start scrolling out and then you see all of Oz. And you start scrolling out, and then you just start scrolling over, and you're just like, oh, all right, then. all right, back to work. Shut the fuck up. Like you don't. And honestly, one of the best quotes we had Alex Viada, who's like owns Complete Human Performance. And he's like an ultra marathoner, only person to ever deadlift 700 pounds and run 2 Ironmans. And like he was telling me the story once where he was in the desert and like basically his body was shutting down, like cramping, systemically cramping from his calves up into his quads. And once it got into his visceral organs, he'd pretty much be dead. And he just repeated to himself as he thought he was going to die that no one cares. And to him, that was like the most liberating thing. It was like, no one cares. And then he's like, well, then why am I doing this? He says, because I must love to do it. If nobody gives a shit that I'm out here, like I must care that I'm out here. And that was enough. And like, you know, you mentioned like, you know, having meaning in what you do. That was enough for him to like have enough meaning to keep going. He was on some crazy double Ironman or something, but I think it's the perspective shift that comes with the awareness of those 3 things in business, especially, will allow you to have the impact that, because no one really, especially in the training space, like in the fitness industry, gets into it to make a ton of money. I don't think that's our driving force, right? Like our driving force is the other people, right? It's a really unique business where it's entirely face-to-face, well, you know, face-to-face digitally now, but it is intended to help other people. It is a virtuous profession if you let it be, right? But a lot of people don't have the awareness around these 3 pillars, and they end up just sort of chasing their tail and doing something in a way that they never intended.
100%. And it's a trap, right? Like that's the thing. Like, you get trapped into that and forever go through that cycle, or you can choose to slow down for a second and do what's right rather than not do what's right, but you know, just go through the process. Like be willing to stop for a second and put yourself through things that are tough and painful, right? For no other reason than you can. And when you that's like probably the most liberating part of you know my life, is that when I realized that, you know, because I was in that trap. Like I've really got to say that is I was in that trap for a long time. And the most liberating thing in my life was when I realized that it's, you know, I can do something about this, and it's bigger than me. Like, you know, there's these little moments that I look back on, and they're just reminders of, you know, this isn't about me. You know, this is much beyond me. Like, you know, me reaching my potential is helping others reach theirs. Like that's the thing that I consistently just tell myself. Like, you know, my ability to reach my potential is why I fucking put in the work day in and day out. It's why I meditate every single day. It's why I haven't not had a cold shower in 3 years. Now, whether or not it actually plays a massive role in my success, it doesn't matter, right? Because it's a big part of me and the story I tell myself, which is me reaching my potential. It's like, well, does it play a role? Like, maybe, but that's not what it's about. It's about me going, okay, well, I'm going to do everything I possibly can, because if I don't, these guys and the people I deal with on a daily basis may not reach their potential. And, you know, that's the biggest thing. It's like, if I can sit there and go through this every single day, it's like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I might get a little bit tired sometimes, you know, times might get a little bit tough, you know, but I'm in a pretty good spot. Like, life's not that bad. You know, there's over a million or, you know, however many people that would kill to be in my position right now. And the more I tell myself that, and the more I understand that it's not about me and what I do has really little to do with me at all, the more I understand that get up, keep going, don't stop.
Yeah, I think that's the takeaway message right there, man. So Steel in the Walls, give us a little bit of insight as to next intake, how they can get a hold of you, where they can register, what the course entails, and then I'll make sure to put all the links in the show notes.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that. August 31st is our next live intake. Basically the course goes for 3 weeks, so it's intensive. You know, you got to show up. It's not something that you can come in and trot through. It's like, you got to show up. There's a workbook that we give out, which takes you through, which I know that sounds pretty corny, but it's kind of got all the tools that we've created in there. And at the same time as learning the principles, you'll be applying those principles to your very own business and learn how to make decisions using our 3 pillars, which is branding, intelligence, and cash flow. So it's 6 lectures, 2 lectures a week, as well as an assessment at the end of the week, as well as making sure that your workbook's done. And we, within our assessments, we are pretty pretty strict on it, right? So it's 100% pass mark for everything, because the business world doesn't allow for anything less. Like 99% just won't get you there. So if you are interested in it, there's a link in my bio. You can just head over to elitevitalitymastery.net, and you'll see a little button there, and it says Steel on the Walls, and you can click through to that, and you'll be able to kind of read information on the courses, hear from other kind of trainers and clinicians that have been through the course, and kind of some of the results that they've gotten, but also some of the things that they learned. So we're excited for it. It is a passion project for us. It's something that I love teaching, because I can, you can actually see by week 3 just the impact it's making on people. It's like, I often talk about it like people being, like it's like a blind person putting on glasses for the first time, like it has that effect, which is really, really cool. But yeah, August 31st, reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm an open book with it. But apart from that, like that's basically it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to do like an intro for the episode, as I always do, and I'm going to do it while you're not around, so I can pump your tires. But you've been integral in personal and professional development in my life, and continue to be on almost a day-to-day basis at this point, the way we communicate. And when I met you, I had a kitchen table that was a piece of lawn furniture, and I was living in someone's backyard. And well, I'm not doing that anymore, so we're doing a lot better. So I can't sing your praises enough, man. You've continued to help me and everyone else that Elite comes in contact with, and I think Steel on the Walls is the best starting point for anyone really looking to take their business seriously and taking themselves seriously as a business owner. So I can't recommend it enough, guys. I'll put all the links in the show notes. Do follow Kyle on social media. I'll put both of the links for Elite and his personal account on there as well. Dude, thank you so much as always. I'm sure I'll reach out with a question in the business field before the rest of the day is out. So thanks so much for your time, man. Appreciate you continually, lending us your insight to RX Radio. We should almost have a column or a segment for you. You've been on so many times, but I appreciate it as it's enlightening every time.
Thanks for having me, man. It's an honor, and those feelings are mutual as well. I learn a lot from you, and probably a bit more as well.
Get out of here! All right, now I'm going to record an intro now, and I'm going to say more nice things about you. So we're not going to have this back and forth. All right, brother. We'll talk soon.
See you, brother.